Right, here we go again. Shannon Boucher, Canadian Culture Wars Report. I finished off my last video with a promise that I was going to talk about this thing that we've heard lots about over the last almost 10 years now. The idea that we've seen repeated through history, this phenomena where an authoritarian leader, an autocrat, even a dictator, creates a narrative that says, I alone can save you. Right? And they use a couple of different tactics. One is they often will use a crisis to re-entrench or entrench power, to use it as an excuse. But that crisis doesn't have to be real. It can be manufactured. I talked about manufacturing consent. You can check out that video, by the way, in the links and somewhere in the video screen. The crisis doesn't have to be real. It can be a narrative that's created or based loosely on something that isn't as scary as it's made out to be, but gets embellished. So we can create a projected crisis, a fake fire over there to say, I'm the one who's going to save you from this fake fire over here. You have to give me more power so that I can fight this. What am I talking about here? I'm talking about the 51st state narrative. And when I use the word narrative, I mean propaganda. I mean a story that's been concocted, partly real perhaps, partly embellished, partly exaggerated, certainly not a neutral observation or reflection of what reality actually is. So we're in the middle of an election and we're hearing fearful narratives, crisis narratives coming from the campaigners. Canada's not going to exist anymore. Tariff threats are going to destroy our economy. Trump wants to annex us. And when we hear things like that, this is part of how autocrats weaponize narratives. And Trump in the States is pretty good at doing that and has used those tactics many times, smaller issues. But we're seeing that weaponized in our own Canadian media landscape. Now, I have some professional expertise to talk about tariffs, to talk about the economic strategy being used by Trump, the reasons behind it, and what the actual level of threat may or may not be. I'm a chartered investment manager, certified financial planner. I've been working in banking and financial planning, tax advisory, and investment advisory for 25 years. And one of the key skills and core competencies of an advisor in my role, working with business owners and professionals and retirees, people who've accumulated some money invested in the markets, is to help manage fear, help manage cognitive bias, to help people I work for understand when emotions take over and we lose sight of rationality. And there are some real neurological and psychological phenomena that I'm going to share. And then I'm going to talk about that strongman tactic. I'm going to evaluate the degree of threat that we might actually be facing or not with respect to the 51st state narrative, the annexation narrative, and the tariff threats. Just that word threat is actually pretty charged. So I want to try and bring down the language a little bit. First of all, I'm going to talk about brain science neurology, cognitive bias. I want to keep it as simple in language as I can. And my last video, I addressed towards the baby boomers, my parents' generation. Love you, Mom. When we are under threat, if we all remember what we learned, perhaps in college or university, certainly we've come across it over the years, something called Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Maslow's hierarchy of needs is a pyramid. And the base level of the pyramid is immediate safety. And then we have food, clothing, and shelter. And then we have some social needs. And then we have some, kind of individual needs. And at the top of the pyramid, self-actualization. This is represented in a number of different models. And we're going to talk about that very base level of the pyramid, immediate safety. So if we don't have immediate safety, if there's a bear chasing us, there's an intensive threat, real or perceived, we move into, and I'm sure we've all heard this, the core three, fight or flight. Well, that's the first two. And along the way, we added freeze. And more recently, we've added Fawn to that collection of neurological responses when we're under threat. So what happens when we go into shock? Physical shock. We have, we're in a car accident, heaven forbid. We've had fallen into cold water. Our blood moves from our extremities into the core of our body and our brain to keep us warm. When we're under threat, we actually move into the reptilian amygdala part of the brain that is going to be deeply, deeply instinctual. So we're going to be, if we get triggered into that fear response, we're going to go into fight, flight, freeze, or fawn as a response. And actually the blood and all of the oxygenated glucose and energy in the prefrontal cortex, that forefront of our brain, will actually kind of drain back, and all the neurons will light up in the amygdala, that primitive reptilian part of our brain, and our bodies are going to react. We're going to move away from logic, reason, into emotions and even physical reflex in order to deal with the threat. So when we're dealing with really intense narratives in the public sphere, especially ones that are existential, and I mentioned CBC because they have an existence threat with the conservatives, but we also have an existence threat from the narrative, the propaganda story that Trump wants to annex Canada and make us part of the United States. And so the instinctual response, if we don't have conscious control over this is not a personal failing in any way. We automatically get thrown into this stress response called into what's called the sympathetic nervous system. And the sympathetic nervous system will take over and will guide our actions, reactions, and how we work our way through this particular problem. Part of the neurological phenomena of the sympathetic nervous system is we go from sort of taking in the whole world in a relaxed state we can go right into a tunnel vision. And if you've really experienced this, you may remember, or you may recall, that your vision narrows and become very myopic and focused on the specific threat that's immediate to us. Can't hear, think, feel anything else. We might be starving, we might be thirsty, we might be right in the middle of something else. We cannot pay attention to anything else at all because our body and our neurology focuses us right in on dealing with the threat. When we lose that cognitive capacity, the forefront of our brain, which really isn't fully developed until we're 25 years old. We talk a lot about this these days. That's our capacity to abstract reason. It's our capacity to see the consequences of our actions. It's our capacity to plan for the future. It's our capacity to kind of, be reflective about relationships, be creative, engage in those creative endeavors, plan for the future. That's actually, when we're talking about consciousness, more or less what the psychologists, what the scientists, what the neurologists think. That's where we kind of think who we think we are is in our brains. We actually, when we get in this fight, flight, freeze, or fawn response, we literally lose our minds. We lose our minds. Not a joke. Our cognitive capacity is severely compromised. So we're currently in the middle of this election campaign. And several months beforehand, when Trump was elected, and Trump, just the name Trump is enough to throw some people into that primitive response: fight, flight, fear, fight, flight, fawn, or freeze. People on the right, and even I am starting to think about this now in terms of something that people call Trump derangement syndrome. It's actually a physiological response. We're so stressed and threatened by this that we lose our capacity and lose our minds. So I suffered from this for years. I talked about my perspectives on Trump and my feeling about Trump in that previous video. So And I'm consciously aware now, aiming to manage my emotional response so that I can best serve the people that I work for, my clients, to help them understand what real threats might be. So let me talk a little bit about what we know about Trump. Most Canadians don't like the guy. There are a few, like I think it's about 25%. It's half or so of people who say they're voting for conservative support Trump. And so the vast majority of Canadians don't like the guy, don't support the guy, and certainly making economic threats and even nationalistic threats against Canada has really got some people worked up. In his first term, and even before that, I mean, I remember Trump and Rosie O'Donnell having this very public feud in New York. And the two of them just ratcheted up this vitriol in the media, and it constantly made news, TMZ, and all these people talking about this fight between Trump and Rosie. And people like Trump live in a world that's full of constant conflict. They actually get a charge out of these kinds of conflicts. They generate this conflict, and then they feed off of the energy that it gives them. They don't function like normal people do. Trump, I believe, is very narcissistic and follows certain patterns that narcissistic people follow: gaslighting, bullying, lying and manipulating, the kind of intimidation and games that Trump plays. Hillary Clinton, crooked Hillary, the people that he targets, he really despises people when they get under his skin. And he turns his rhetoric and the force now of his office against those people. Trump and the Republican administration in the United States, look, even a broken clock is right twice a day. And through the arc of history, there are certain things that are in the best interest of whatever country we happen to be living in that the leader of that country will have to deal with. And one of the things that the Trump administration and the organizations behind Trump, so I can think of one specifically because I've met the people behind the scenes and talked to them who were working in Washington, D.C. on the transgender issue going back 3 years, the America First Policy Institute, the AFPI. And they were formulating policy under the assumption that there would be a second Trump administration, planning the logistics. And one of the core things that they were dealing with, and that I believe sane and rational people have been aware of for the last 10 years, is what we call DEI, wokeness, critical social justice, this ideological movement that has taken over so many of our institutions all over the West. It's a radical leftist progressive agenda. Progressive is another word we use to talk about it. And that as a phenomenon within US institutions, universities, healthcare, the bureaucratic administrative state, we could call it, the education, federal education administration department, all captured by this radical ideology. Anti-racism is all tied into this stuff. And so is transgenderism. Okay, so somebody's got to deal with that. And that is the reason why the Democrats did not get elected, because they've been so captured by this radical ideology, far left. It's not an exaggeration to say a far left radical ideology. Small number of people who use bullying, intimidation, threats, hysteria, histrionics. I mean, we were at a point not long ago where any questioning of a transgender person was akin to killing them, right? That's how histrionic they got into, that threat mindset, into the fight, flight, freeze, or fawn mindset, and all of a sudden, any questioning of the transgender ideology was erasing trans people and committing trans genocide. Honestly, blows my mind talking about brain science. And that is why the Democrats lost. They still haven't figured that out. I mentioned in a video before, I am a liberal in my spirit. I'm a little bit left of center in my traditional political stance and leanings. And certainly in the US political landscape, I would be a Democrat, even at one point, a more progressive Democrat. These threats that we're experiencing, right? So Trump has to deal with the DEI what he calls the deep state or the administrative state, that whole thing. And it would have been another Republican president. If it had been Ron DeSantis, he would have been dealing with the same thing. And to try and root this out of our institutions, because it's extremely destructive. It's anti-human. In all of its claims for virtue, it actually, the results that it achieves are actually the opposite. In any case, fight, flight, freeze, or fawn, we lose our minds. Okay. And Trump is very good at playing this game on the other side of the coin. So in his Trump term 1, he would have target after target after target. And there were people that would come into his orbit that would be seeking to work, for him to accomplish Republican objectives, even close advisors like Anthony Scaramucci and his former fixer. I forget the guy's name. I'm sure if you follow that whole thing, he'll remember. Narcissistic tactic or phenomena is they switch or they flip or it's called splitting. So you can go from being in the good books to the bad books just like that. And all of a sudden, Trump's got a nasty name for you. So Canada has been largely ruled by the Trudeau Liberals and their DEI woke agenda for the last 9 years. He started with putting 50% of women in his cabinet because it's 2015, and very shortly followed by saying that all women must be believed no matter what, creating this wide open situation where women could very easily and were encouraged in the systems that we have to make false allegations against men. Of course, not all women who are coming forward and saying that Epstein or Weinstein or whoever the Tates abused me are lying. Many are telling the truth in those cases, but the way that the woke frame things is that they split too: men bad, women good, all bad. So Trump has this switch that he flips, and he does not like and did not like Justin Trudeau. Okay, so we know Trump's an asshole. And he'll start calling people names. He'll bully people. So there, in these policy institutes, these think tanks in the United States preparing for the new Trump administration, came up with a quite an old set of policy ideas around tariffs. And because of my profession, economics, finance, investments, trade, right, advising my clients, I've read the policy papers behind the tariff philosophy, and I understand where they're coming from. I don't agree with it, but I understand their policy position on it. And we got to remember that there is the backroom policy position, and then there's the Trump rhetoric and his carnival barking and his blustering and his negotiation tactics in order to get to the end result that they want. The end result that they're looking for is to repatriate manufacturing and businesses to the United States. Over the last several decades, we know there's been manufacturing leave to cheaper markets. There's something called labor arbitrage. So South Korea was cheaper to build cars in, and China was cheaper to build, kitchen utensils in, and widgets and gadgets and those things that flood the dollar stores, and lots of other trade with China and Mexico for that matter. That was cheaper to manufacture in those markets. So companies, that's part of economics, we're going to look for the labor arbitrage. We're going to go where labor is cheaper. We have that with knowledge work in between North America and India right now. India every year graduates 1.2 million knowledge workers. It's wild. And their cost of service and wages and overhead is about a third to a quarter of what it is in North America. That's labor arbitrage. And so over the last several decades, manufacturing and a lot of even service stuff has left North America, left Canada, left the United States, and it's kind of hollowed out the middle, which has been a part of the phenomena that's created this increasing gap between the very wealthy and the poorest. The middle class is disappearing into this division between the haves and the have-nots. So Trump made promises to bring back the middle class in America, bring back manufacturing, revitalize places like Detroit, in order to grow the economy. The Rust Belt, that's like Michigan, Minnesota. Other people are going to be better at this than me. Ohio, in Trump's first election, were really where he surprised everybody and won, because he made these promises. And so while he was out of office, these policy institutes were creating the policies to say, okay, the way to do this is we're going to put up trade barriers with these other countries that are, and we're going to actually punish the companies that are doing this with and that who are exploiting the labor arbitrage internationally. And we want to put up a wall around America, and we want to repatriate these investment dollars and encourage the redevelopment and the revitalization of the American economy. And if I were in America, I might be tempted to lean towards that that's a win for America. It's not a win for the target countries that Trump is going after and putting tariffs up on, but it is, in theory, it's a win for America. Now, there's lots of reasons why this is not going to work. It's not. And we have to have a little bit of patience, because it won't take long for this to wring itself out, and the Americans are going to realize that the tariffs are going to create inflation. They're going to create all kinds of other problems. There's no such thing as a winning decision in economics. There's always a trade-off. There's a winner, there's a loser. So the Trump tariff policies are going to create winners and they're going to create losers, even in the United States. And I don't think that they're going to last too long. Now, there could be a lot of damage done in the meantime. So here's part of the trade-off. And I'm oversimplifying. I was in an analyst call this morning. It is Friday, March the 28th, with my colleagues in the analyst call. And there was a flight of capital from the United States to the tune of $3 trillion from the American stock markets. People said, you know what? I'm not as interested in U.S. companies right now, and there's more opportunity in Europe. So Europe saw a big rip in their stock market. They've been languishing for a while, and the U.S. stock market, or the European stock markets, have actually gone up while the American ones have gone down. Now, that's a trade-off. Flight of capital, $3 trillion. On the other hand, Trump is now bragging that he has brought $3 trillion of investments into the United States in the form of auto manufacturers and other big business that have said, okay, we're going to bring our business. NVIDIA was a big one. We're going to bring our business to the United States to stimulate the economy. So let's circle back to the flight, freeze, or fawn. Trump announces his tariffs back after he wins the election. He's going to impose 25% tariffs on a bunch of countries, including Canada. Our illustrious leader, and pardon me, like our fuck up in chief, the guy who has run his whole prime minister ship as someone who inflames conflict wherever he goes. And he gets away with it because he's a pretty boy and he's named Trudeau, and he's got the media behind him to kind of paper over just what an asshole Justin Trudeau is. And Trump doesn't like him. He's got him on the split list, where he, if he hadn't started calling him names already, he was going to call him more names and ramp up the rhetoric against Trudeau. Trudeau goes down to Mar-a-Lago, complete dipshit, makes a comment at dinner that, this is really going to wreck Canada. And Trump replies with what is a Trumpian joke. It's a name-calling tactic. It's a bullying tactic that he uses. It is not actually serious. Says, well, maybe you'd be better as the 51st state. And that, two things happened there. One is Trump knew that he got the knife in and he was starting to twist it a bit with Trudeau. The other thing that happened was that Trudeau capitalizes on your fears. And he's done this in a bunch of different ways in his divisive policies and politics through the period that he was our prime minister. And it serves a autocratic, authoritarian, narcissistic personality, which Trudeau also is, to embellish the threats, I alone can save you, in order to gain legitimacy and cement power. So it was actually in Trudeau's interest to embellish the threat of the 51st state, to then start saying Trump wants to annex us. And if you talk to people in the US, this is a joke. It's a joke. And this is going to make some viewers uncomfortable. I know, because I laughed when we were watching the US-Canada hockey game after the trash talking from the US press secretary. We're going to enjoy beating our future 51st state. Like this is the jovial kind of stuff. We get we're going into hockey playoffs, and there's always a bet between the city mayors of the two hockey teams. If we win, you got to give us this, and vice versa. And it's always in good nature. And in sports, we always get trash talking, whether you're on the ice, trash talking the other players, or whether you're a fan and you're trash talking the other players. That's a part of the game. But because we fell into this fight, flight, freeze, or fawn mode, all of a sudden, all of these jokes and all of this ribbing that's from Trump is not good nature. But all of this name calling, splitting, you're the bad person kind of tactic that Trump uses to bully people. Actually, we got triggered. We lost our minds. And it became an existential threat, like the existence of Canada is at stake from Orange Man bad. And our media, which is biased and owned, as I talked about in that previous video, owned by the Liberal government. $600 million a year media fund, 1.3 billion CBC, funding hundreds of journalists whose livelihoods are at stake in this election coming up. Are all biased towards getting the Liberals back in power. So what I'm saying here, okay, let me think through this and see, and I'd invite you to kind of think through, could the US actually create a narrative? Could Trump do this in the United States and say, look, Canada's got weapons of mass destruction. They're a threat to the United States, and they really are an illegitimate country that play a Putin game and said we're just going to, because manifest destiny or whatever it is, say we're going to take over Canada. And how would the world react? It's so ridiculous that we shouldn't even be talking about it. It's ridiculous. This is Trump bullying a guy that he hates, like he has bullied hundreds of other people with jabs and name calling and absolutely ridiculous kinds of manufactured accusations and manufactured threats. Trump is a carnival barker, and he's just spewing he's not scripted. Whatever comes out of his mouth comes out of his mouth. Okay, that's Trump. So we have allowed that narrative in Canada. And we've lost our minds because we actually taking this guy seriously on the annexation threat. Now, at no point did Trump say we're annexing Canada. He has joked about maybe Canada is going to be better off as a 51st state. Boo-hoo. This is part of his negotiation tactics. If you don't like it, join the US. Well, obviously, we're not going to do that. Now, let me shift. Tariffs. Is there anything that we can do? The United States is 10 times the size of Canada's economy. If the United States wants to go protectionist, we are going to lose a trade war. We're going to lose. If you haven't kind of sorted through this by now, a tariff that Trump applies on Canadian goods going into the United States is paid for by American businesses and American consumers on the US side. Canadian government can still sell that. We're the majority supplier of steel and aluminum to the United States. It will cost them more to go elsewhere. They still need our steel and aluminum to build their cars if they want to repatriate their manufacturing or patriate car manufacturing to the United States. They still have to buy what we have to sell. And they've decided that their tactic is they're going to pay more for it, which is destructive to the US economy. Sometimes the best thing you can do with a narcissist like Trump is say, go ahead. Go ahead. We don't agree with what you're doing. We don't think it's actually a good idea for your country. While you're doing that, we're going to renegotiate our trade deals here. You go ahead, ignore the guy. Don't inflame the situation by saying we're going to make Americans suffer as much as possible. We're going to cut off your electricity like Doug Ford. Because Trump is 10 times stronger economically than Canada. And he will only escalate. He has never de-escalated. We know this about him. And so us trying to step up to a bully that's 10 times stronger than we are is only a losing proposition. This is a tremendous opportunity for us as Canadians to, it's not a question of if anymore. Our provincial trade barriers are coming down. And I've looked at this with some analysis. We have a Bloomberg in the office. I've got amazingly intelligent colleagues that I'm fortunate to be surrounded by, and I've listened to some other great experts on this. Interprovincial trade barriers are coming down. We're going to standardize a bunch of stuff across the country. That can increase our GDP by 3 or 4%. That's going to be spread out over a couple of years, but it's a really great thing that we finally have the fire under our butts to get rid of those interprovincial trade restrictions. There are more trade restrictions within Canada between provinces than there are with other countries, which is, I can't even. Okay, it's an incentive now to develop, to accelerate the development of our critical minerals and develop markets east and west. It blows the doors off of all the justifications for the Trudeau-Carney doctrine of suppressing our resource production in the name of reducing carbon. The east-west pipelines are going to go through. We're going to get Canadian natural gas to Europe. We're going to get Canadian natural gas and resources to the Pacific Rim, which is starving for what we have. And we're gonna change our foolish dependence on U.S. resources. We don't need to be in a fight with Trump. You want to do that? Go ahead. And I think that we can strategically, I honestly, people are going to disagree with me on this. Remember, don't lose your mind, okay? That Danielle Smith has taken the best track towards dealing with this issue out of any public figure in Canada. And the reason is she recognized what worked with Trump before. Trump's a TV watcher, and he follows these big influencers. People like Ben Shapiro actually have a pathway to Trump. Prager University, the charity think tank that's right of center in the United States. He watches CNN, and he watches Fox News. And people strategically got onto those platforms in the United States in his first term to talk to him because he's in the office watching television. That's part of the way that people negotiated with him in the past. And that's part of the strategy that Danielle Smith has used, not antagonizing the guy, not getting into a fight with a guy, not raising the stakes and creating that flip of the switch, okay? That where people lose their minds and all of a sudden we can't negotiate anymore because we're throwing nasty names at each other and the relationships break down. Absolutely the wrong tactic. So something came out this morning from Juno News. That's Candace Malcolm. It's formerly True North. It's a bit of a merger between a couple of right of center political commentators. And it is that the head of the Eurasia Group, okay? Mark Carney's wife works for the Eurasia Group. And her boss wrote an article about the tariff wars, the rhetoric that's going back and forth, the existential threat that Mark Carney has picked up on, and the left-wing media, the liberal-owned media in Canada, has been capitalizing on to create fear in us around this issue. The Eurasia Group president puts out an article and says, after the election, all this tariff rhetoric, this posturing, and this escalation is kind of quietly going to go away. And it's going to go away for the very fact that if we put retaliatory tariffs on the United States, I've said this many times over the last few weeks, it's like stepping up to a fight and punching yourself in the face. Retaliatory tariffs are taxes that we impose on American goods coming into Canada that will raise our prices. From an economic standpoint, it's inflationary. It's going to slow our economy down. Like, it's going to do all the things to the Canadian economy times about 5 or maybe 10 that tariffs will do to the U.S. economy on the U.S. side. Those are those trade-offs. Okay, so part of our strategy needs to be, and again, Daniel Smith is the only one who's effectively doing this, talking through U.S. right-wing and centrist media to the president via those media platforms and to the American people, saying tariffs are going to make your lives worse. The trade-offs are going to be too uncomfortable and they're a bad idea. And this morning, there was a confirmation that I saw online about some polls in the United States that 2/3 or more, like 70% of Americans, are against tariffing Canada because they're waking up to the problem. So we didn't need to have a fight. We didn't need to raise the stakes. We didn't need to lose our minds and go into fight, flight, fawn, or freeze. And I made this video because I want to make you aware that I am the only one who can save you narrative. Mark Carney is the guy who's going to save you from Donald Trump. It's an exploitation it's a hijacking of your nervous system to get you to put liberals back into the leadership of Canada for a 4th term, forgetting everything else. Remember what happens? We lose all our critical capacity. We're only focused on the immediate threat. We forget everything else. And anything that tries to take our attention away from that narrow, myopic focus is gone. And we'll actually create trigger responses where we will go and we'll fight anything that comes at us because we're in such a threat stage. This was longer than I expected. My name is Shannon Boucher. This is the Canadian Culture Wars Report. I'm going to do more of these video explainers trying to address some of the high-level issues like propaganda and like how our brains work and some of the deeper issues around these economics, finance, trade and investments. I don't usually do this, but because I have expertise in this area, if you are concerned about your own investment portfolio, your financial issues, taxes and questions and things like that, I'm happy to talk to you. I have a fiduciary obligation to confidentiality. If we engage in that kind of conversation, feel free to reach out to me through my firm, Exponent Investment Management in Ottawa. And I'm very happy to go deeper into some of these conversations as they might apply directly to you. Make sure you like and subscribe. This is the Canadian Culture Wars Report. Once again, Shannon Boucher.